Good morning, Dr. Greenhurst.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you.
And I hope it is not a bad time there, right?
No, it's fine. It's okay. It's okay.
So do you want to share your screen, and if you have any audio and video, check that?
Yes. Let me just yeah, this is my slides. Is that okay for you?
Yes, I can. Yeah, it is clear.
That's great. Sorry, I just need to move something onto my other screen here. That's good. And how many people do you expect at the conference?
There were a total of 275 registrations, but yeah,
175. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's
really great. Well, I guess we'll see how many show up for the keynote. That's good though.
Yeah.
It looks like a very interesting conference.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. So actually, I think in some parts of US, it's very early in the morning. For example, in California, it's around 6:30, something like that. So it is very early. I hope they can join.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So dear attendees, if you are a presenter, please raise your hand so I will promote you to a panelist. If you are a presenter for this session. Also, you can ask your questions via Q&A. So Dr. Brinkhurst, do you have any slide with audio or video, and you want to check those ones as well to make sure the speed rate and the audio is okay?
Yes, I think I have one. Let me see. This one here has some slide. So seems okay. Yeah, it seems great.
Yes. The speed rate, I was not sure it was meant to be like that. It has some lacking, but I think since the audio was good, it was the way that it was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, that was fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cheyenne, can you please make sure all organization committee are added as a panelist?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Hi, how are
Mark,
you?
great to see you.
Hey, good. And good to see you. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, Mark.
Hey there.
Maybe you want to pause the recording, Paisa, and start the recording.
So you started the record. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna start now. I'm just waiting for it to be exactly 30. With my atomic watch. Hi, everyone. Welcome to ACM Spatial User Interaction 2021. It's a great privilege to be hosting this conference this year virtually, along with the General Chair Rob Tether and myself, Francisco Ortega. We are welcoming everyone to this conference. We have a great program. We have a lot of papers. The program chairs, the poster chairs as well, and demo chairs have worked really hard to have the best content possible. And I think we'll have a lot of fun. We also are in Discord, and we're going to be recording most sessions and releasing on YouTube for later play, but this will take a few weeks. So today is 9:30 Eastern time, and tomorrow the conference will have, I think, starts an hour later. You can check that in programs, and we'll cover that towards the end of the day today. Next slide. Yeah. So the general chairs are Rob Tether and myself, Rob from Carleton University in Canada and Colorado State University myself. So again, like I was saying, we're extremely happy and glad to start this symposium. I think it's going to be great. We have amazing keynote speakers, 2 of them, and a great program. Next. So while you can check on the SUI website, sui.ascm.org, our program, we'll be reminding you of this. Now, what we did for simplicity, and you should have received on the latest email today again, different Zoom links for different sessions. You can also go to Discord. The Zoom links for today are there. Tomorrow we'll release the ones for tomorrow. And we'll start today with our opening keynote after we finish all the introductions of the organization committee, and we'll have 4 sessions of papers, 2 today, 2 tomorrow. We'll have a poster demo fast forward tomorrow as well. And we're gonna have a social via Discord, tomorrow, where you can chat anything that you want. Of course, you can chat at any time in Discord. And we do encourage you that you may not be able to get all your questions to the keynotes or to the paper presenters. Please do so during the different times that you may be able to connect to Discord to ask them questions or comments. Also, we have 2 poster demo sessions in Discord where they'll be presenting their posters. Depending on their availability, they may be actually there during those times. So again, we encourage you that you please go and try to interact with them. And this would be a great thing to have some type of connection with the poster demo presenters, as we're not in a face-to-face conference. In total, we have 17 paper presentation, 12 posters, 1 demo, and 2 keynotes, as I mentioned. Next. So we don't know, this will be up to the steering committee, but maybe hoping that will be a face-to-face or hybrid in 2022. The papers are available in the ACM Digital Library. I believe they're available if you're not a member for like a month for free. And you can check the proceeding link in the program, but we also have emailed you that, and feel free to message any of the students volunteer or any of us with any questions. Next. So I do want to thank the entire organizing committee, the steering committee, Evan Sumer Rosenberg, Frank Stenke, Christian Sander, and Wolfgang Scherlinger. I apologize for the pronunciation. They're the one who picked the general chairs and the program chairs. Of course, the help from the publicity chair, Nikita Soni, which is going to start as assistant professor in the University of Chicago in January, so very soon. Web chair, who's been amazing, so much work, Nicholas Lipari. Our social media chair, Farjana Ashita. Again, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your names. And proceeding chair, Steven Spencer, has been great as well. And of course, the program chairs, they've done most of the heavy lifting. That's Garrett Bruder. Again, I'm gonna mispronounce some names, but Tamatip Pusombum, which has one of my favorite papers, Grabs and Shell, I should mention, and Benjamin Wagers are the program chairs. And the poster and demo chairs, again, Anil Ufak Batsmans, Kyle Johnson, and Christoph Borges did a lot of work as well. Next. And I have to say that maybe the ones that have worked the hardest are being the student volunteer chairs, Brooke Bowers, which is the Discord expert, Faisa Burhani, Shayan Su, and Aditya Raikwar. I'll be helping throughout the conference here. And Faisa's also been with Brooke, probably the leading student volunteers. Next. This should have gone after for the program chairs to mention, but I'll mention this is here. The International Program Committee was selected by the program chairs, and we want to thank all of them. I cannot read everyone's name, but we want to thank you so much for doing all the work to be able to get the best content possible. And thank you. Next. So how do you participate? You can go to Discord, use Discord a lot, as much as possible, Zoom. YouTube will be available at some point after the conference, maybe a couple of weeks after, for you to watch any session that you may have missed. But definitely try to participate in Discord, and you'll be able to ask questions via the chat in Zoom if you're an attendee. But of course, depending on the time, we may not be able to get to all your questions. Ask questions in the channel help announcement, and if there's any questions, email general@sui.acm.org, it comes to me and Rob, or the SBs as well. Thank you. Next. And this is Gert.
Thank you, Francisco. My name is Gerd Bruder, and on behalf of my two program co-chairs, Sam and Benjamin, I have the honor of saying a few words about our paper review process this year. Next slide, please. We used a double-blind review process where each paper received reviews from 2 members of our International Program Committee, as well as an external reviewer invited by the committee. After submitting the reviews, each paper was then discussed among the reviewers, and the recommendation was then shared with the program chairs, who made the final decisions on the program. Next slide, please. Paper submissions at SUI fall into 2 general categories, full papers and short papers. In statistics, we received a total of 43 submissions. Overall, our submissions this year were of pretty high quality, so we are very happy to say that we could accept 17 of them. The papers will be presented in 4 sessions at this conference, 2 today and 2 more tomorrow. Further, 12 of our papers paper submissions were accepted as posters, which will be presented today and tomorrow in their paper sessions. Next slide, please. So we've already seen our International Program Committee, but I'd also like to thank all of our external reviewers this year who did an excellent job. They submitted their reviews on time and helped us decide on a great program. So on behalf of myself and my co-chairs, thank you very much for your contributions to this conference. Next slide, please. And handing over to Ufuk.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anuf Batmaz from Kadir Has University. And today I'm happy to announce that we were the posters and demo chairs with Kyle Johnson and Christoph Bors. Next slide, please. So we had 2 different tracks for the posters. The first track was we received poster and demo submissions. We received in total 6 poster submissions and 1 demo submission. From them, then we accepted 4 posters and 1 demo also is accepted from the submissions. We also received 8 posters from the paper track. And in total, we have 12 posters and 1 demo in this conference for today and tomorrow. During the submission that we used double-blind review process, what we did is all the papers are reviewed by at least 2 poster chairs. And at the end, we discussed the submissions and we decided for each submission if it's going to be accepted and or rejected. Next slide, please. So thank you very much.
All right, so thank you again. Of course, I know people have different time zones. I understand that, but especially for the posters and demos that they don't get the attention that they will get in a regular conference, stay on the previous slide, please. If you can interact with them during the sessions, that will be great. So anyways, thank you. We have a great day. And now we're going to go into the keynote presentation. Next slide. So it's a great privilege and in order to have a keynote Dr. Mark Billinghurst. I think a lot of you, I'm sure everyone knows him, but I think it's going to be a great keynote. The title of his talk is Spatial Teleconferencing, and he's currently a director of the Empathetic Computing Lab and professor at the University of South Australia, and also in the University of Auckland in New Zealand. He earned a PhD in 2002 from the University of Washington and conduct research on virtual and real worlds that can be merged virtual and real worlds that can be merged. So AR published over 550 papers on augmented reality, virtual reality, remote collaboration, empathetic computing, and related topics. And I would say that empathetic computing is something that, if I'm not mistaken, Mark is the one who has coined. In 2013, he was elected to the Fellow of the Royal Society in New Zealand. In 2019, he was given the Ismark Career Impact Award in recognition for lifetime contribution to AR research and commercialization. So, Mark, it is a pleasure. I thank you again so much for accepting. And we'll stop sharing this slide, and the floor will be yours. You have, we start a little early, but you still will, maybe there'll be more Q&A. And the session, the session goes until what time before the break? Remind me. I don't have it in front of me. Okay. So I'll go ahead and the session goes until 10 p.m. Eastern. Is that right? Or 10:30? 10:30? Faisa, I can't hear you.
Yes.
Yes, 10:30.
10:45, I think.
So I think we'll have plenty of time, Mark, but if anything, I'll
we
let
have
you
1
know
hour.
if we're running longer. Say it again, Faisa.
I said until 10:45, so we have 1 hour.
10:45, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Mark. Now I'll leave you here.
Great, so thank you so much. I hope you can hear me okay. It's a great pleasure to be virtually attending. I wish we were all be able to attend face-to-face, but hopefully next year we can do that. So as I was introduced, my name is Mark Billinghurst, and I'm working at the University of South Australia and also the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And today I'm going to talk about spatial teleconferencing. So the main topic is really around communication. The Brazilian educator Paulo Freire said that only through communication can human life hold meaning. And, so communication is a very, very important element of what we do in our everyday lives. And if you look at how we communicate, you can see there are several aspects. You can see here a group of people communicating with architects, and they use a wide range of communication cues, of course, audio cues and visual cues, but also they interact with their environment around them. You can see the architects looking at a model on the table, as well as pointing at drawings on the table as well. So you can see there are a number of communication channels that we should share in face-to-face communication: audio, visual, and environmental channels. But when we are remote, of course, the ability to share those cues becomes more difficult. And so over the last thousands of years, we've developed technology to help us with that. So here's a little snapshot of evolution of different types of technologies, all the way from cave paintings, 30,000 years ago, through to mobile phones and the modern kind of multi-channel communication we have, where we've got mobile and social media and a whole bunch of channels we use all at once. So teleconferencing today involves many different types of devices, from mobile phones to dedicated teleconferencing suites, all the way to these types of telepresence robots. But using this technology means it's still a little bit different from what happens in face-to-face communication. In particular, if we return back to the original slide, you can see here the architects sitting around a table, and they're really talking about this building. So the task space is what's happening on the table. And then, of course, while they're looking at the building and talking about it, they can still see each other to some extent and see the communication cues that they're all showing, their face expressions or their hand gestures. And so the communication space is really a superset of this task space. But when we start trying to do the same thing over remote conferencing, it changes a little bit. So you can see here a remote conferencing setup where you've got a group of chemists talking to some remote colleagues, and they're using two screens. One screen is showing a chemical molecule, and the other screen is showing the faces of the people on the remote link. But what we see here, though, is we see that the task space now is separate from the communication space, and there's this kind of communication seam between the two. It's impossible to look at the molecules on the screen and then keep the face expression and look at the face expression of your colleagues at the same time. So There are a number of limitations with today's technology. You can see there are a lack of spatial cues. If you're using video conferencing, then oftentimes your face kind of blends into the background as opposed to face where you can see each other as a 3D person. And there are also poor communication cues. It's sometimes hard to understand where people are looking or gesturing, and sometimes the audio is not as clear as it could be, so nonverbal cues and have some problems also as well. And then, as I just said, there's these introduction of artificial seams that separate the physical and digital environments, and that separates out the task and communication space. So we have a number of problems with today's technology. But when we start talking about collaboration in VR and AR, some of those problems are overcome. So you can see here the alt space and Facebook spaces, social VR spaces, and you can see in this case now they're trying to reproduce face-to-face communication. You know, in Facebook spaces, you can see 3D avatars of the people that you're talking with, and you see the face expressions and hand gestures, and so to some extent it feels like you are in the real world with them. And then in augmented reality you can see something similar. This is the Magic Leap avatar chat from a couple of years ago, and in this case you can see virtual people coming into your real world, and they appear part of the real world. So these virtual avatars appear next to real people. And so again, they share some of the communication cues you have with a real person in terms of sharing gesture and gaze. So what I'm going to talk about today is how you can use AR and VR for next generation spatial teleconferencing, and in a number of ways. You can use it to copy and share spaces, to change the scale of collaboration, to copy your body and share nonverbal cues and change perspective and share views and a wide range of things. So one of the really exciting things about spatial user interfaces and about VR and AR is that unlike other teleconferencing, where oftentimes the focus is on people's faces, you can now use this to share spaces and have a real spatial experience. But in many of these examples, the real person is represented by some sort of avatar. So you can see here, you've got these two black people that are real, and then you've got a red and a blue virtual avatar. So we have to map our real communication cues onto these virtual avatars, and then we perceive the other person's virtual avatar, and through that hopefully communicate effectively with the other person. But because we are represented in AR and VR as a virtual avatar, we can do a lot of things we can't do with a real body. So this screen shows a kind of little stylized shot of some of the things I'm going to talk about today. So one of the things we can do is we can share virtual communication cues that might enhance communication. We could also engage with an artificial intelligent agent, and so rather than communicate with a real person, we could communicate with an agent. And we could use technology to capture and share scenes and a wide range of other things as well. So I'm going to talk about some of those today and relate them back to the overall theme of spatial teleconferencing. So first of all, one of the oldest things people have been exploring with AR and VR and collaboration is changing your perspective. So in the early 90s, 1992, British Telecom developed a system you can see on the right, which is called the CamNet. And this system, you were wearing on your head a camera and also a monocular display over one eye, and you had a microphone, and then your camera view was shared back to a remote person, and the remote person could see what you're seeing, and then they could annotate on the view, and the annotation was shared back to you in the monocular display. And so in that way you had a remote person who was looking through your eyes and was helping you perform tasks in the real world. So this was 1992, and then a few years later, Carnegie Mellon started doing work on this with wearable computers, and they showed that this type of setup could cut your performance time in real-world tasks by up to half. You know, if you're doing a task like fixing a piece of equipment, having a remote person being able to see what you're seeing and provide feedback would help tremendously. So we've been developing similar things. This is our version of that, and there are many other research labs and companies now have produced this as a commercial product. But in this version, we have my postdoc Weidong is wearing a Sony Epson, actually, Epson smart glasses. And on top of the Epson glasses, he has a depth sensing camera, and we can share the depth sensing camera view with the remote person. And then so on this side, you see what he's seeing. So on the right-hand side, this is the remote expert view, and the expert is drawing on the video coming from the person. On the left-hand side, this is the view in augmented reality. And so the expert can make an annotation, and then that AR annotation appears fixed in the real world. So there's nothing tremendously novel about this. As I said, a lot of people have been working on this for a while, but you can see one of the limitations of this, and that is that the remote person can only see where the person who's wearing the head-mounted camera is looking. So for the remote person, they have quite a limited awareness of the other person's real world. So a couple of years ago, we developed a new system called the Shared Sphere, and the system was using a 360 camera instead. So you can see on the left-hand side a person wearing an augmented reality display, and then they have also a 360 camera on the head, and we can live stream 360 video to a person on the right-hand side who's wearing a VR headset. And now, because it's 360 video, it means that the person in VR can look anywhere they want. And we also have some gesture capture capability using leap motion on the VR headset. So the person who's in VR can move their hands in front of their face. We can capture their hands and send it back to the person inside the AR display. So now they have these kind of ghost hands appearing in front of their face. So let me show you a video of what this looks like. This is a project we did with the power company in South Australia. And you can see here a person looking at the control panel of a power station. He's wearing a Microsoft HoloLens and a 360 camera on his head. And then in his AR display, he can see this ghost hand appearing, and the ghost hand is drawing and annotating and pointing using the green ink. You can also see a green rectangle. The green rectangle shows where the other person is looking, because of course now the people can look anywhere they want, so they can need to know where they are. So this is the remote person. He's now looking around the 360 video, and because the video is taken from the local person's perspective, he really feels like he's sharing the same body, and he can feel like he's standing in the same location as the person. And so as you can see, he can draw in the real world, make annotations, and of course they can talk to each other as well. So it's a very natural way to communicate. But one of the limitations though is that we are showing the video as a virtual bubble. And so what that means is that the remote expert can't walk through the space. It doesn't have any sense of 3D geometry or a real sense of immersion in the space. So a couple of years ago, we extended that and we developed a live 3D scene capture system. So in this system, we have a cluster of depth sensing cameras, and each of these captures a point cloud of what's in front of them. So we have 6 of them in a cluster like this, and then we can fuse together the point cloud in real time. So what it means now is that we can create a real-time 3D model of what the cameras can see in the space in front of the cameras. So this video shows that. On the left-hand side, you see a God's eye perspective, and on the right-hand side, you can see the first-person perspective. And so this is part of our lab space, and in a minute, you'll see my student walking in. So here's my student coming into the lab space now, and you can see he's a 3D geometry or 3D model walking through the space. You'll see some limitations though. So wherever the blue is, this is where the cameras can't see because of occlusion or limited range. And then the table in the middle is supposed to be a very flat table, but you can see it looks like it has a kind of a wave going through it. And that's because the camera calibration is not completely accurate. But overall, you can get the impression that now with this approach, you can live stream to a remote person in VR, and the remote person in VR can now walk through the space, unlike with the shared sphere, and feel like they're part of the space. So what that means is that over the last few years, we've gone from sharing just 2D video to sharing 360 video and now 3D geometry. So that means we've created a lot more increased immersion and also improved scene understanding, because you can perceive the 3D geometry of the space, and also overall better collaboration. So this is one example of how new technology is enabling us to share spaces and not just share faces like you have with a Zoom call. And the hope is that within maybe 5 or 10 years' time, we'll have a small handheld device that will allow us to hold it up and to capture in real time the geometry of our surroundings and stream that as well. And so enable remote people to really feel like they're in the same space as us. But in addition to sharing the space, there's other additional cues you can add to that to help with communication. So in particular, a few years ago, we developed what we call the empathy glasses, and these glasses were designed to create share some of the same implicit cues we have in face-to-face communication. So in face-to-face communication, we of course can share eye gaze and we can share a face expression. But when we start sharing head-mounted camera view to a remote person, we no longer can see the other person's face and we don't know where they're looking. So we combined together 3 pieces of technology to help us share those things. So we combined a Pupil Labs eye tracker with an Epson AR display, and then also with an effective wear frame. And the effective wear has photo sensors around it, and this allows you to measure the distance between the skin and the eyeglass frame. And so what this means is when a person makes a face expression, we can detect that expression, and if they're smiling or frowning, because the skin distance to the frames change, and we can represent that as well. So these 3 pieces of technology allow us to share eye gaze and to share face expression. So this is how we integrated them together. You can see the left-hand side, the person wearing all the technology. In addition to that, they're also wearing a heart rate sensor. And then on the right-hand side, you can see what they're seeing in their head-mounted display. So they stream video to a remote person. The remote person can then annotate on the video or point on the video, and that's reflected back to this person here. Now he can see the remote pointing. So on the right-hand side, you can see this green sphere, and the sphere shows where the remote expert is pointing. But then you can also, more importantly, see the red sphere. And the red sphere is the eye gaze of this person in doing their task. And so we can also share that with the remote person. And that makes it, that's really important, because that's an important implicit cue. So people always look at objects before they interact with them. And so now we can tell whether the person is following what the instructions are because they're looking at the correct object. And that implicit cues also means that you can know what they're going to do before they do it. So you can imagine an extreme example of maybe when the person was doing a bomb disposal task, and you had to help them do the task. And if they cut the wrong wire, it could be disastrous. So now I can know which wire they're about to cut because I can see where their eye gaze is going. So this enabled us to share these important implicit cues. And also on the bottom-hand side, you can see the face expression and the heart rate. So let me show you a video of this working. Just turn the audio down a bit here. So you can see on the right-hand side, a person is arranging a set of blocks in kind of a picture. And then the other person now is helping them do some tasks. And as I said, the expert uses the mouse pointer to move the green dot around. And you can see the red dot following him. So we can know how much attention the local worker is doing if the red dot and the green dot are lining up very well. So you can see here's some of the technology that's being used, and this is again the photo sensors to reflect the face expression. And as they start doing the task, you'll see when he completes the task, his face expression changes and the icon changes on the desktop as well. So that was sharing gaze and some face expression cues in a video situation, but we can do the same thing in 3D. So it's becoming more common now to have, I guess you'd call it asymmetric collaboration, where you've got a person who's in the real world wearing an AR display, and they are streaming their view or collaborating with somebody who's in VR. And so the VR person is immersed in a copy of the real world and helping perform a task. So when you're wearing the AR display, you can see the virtual person or the real person in VR as a virtual person in your space. So in this case, both people are represented by these pink heads, and they also had hand icons representing their hands as well. But in this case, we want to explore what happens when you could add additional communication cues. So normally in a face-to-face communication, you can see where the other person's looking if you can see their face. But if you look away from their face, you have no idea where they're looking. But if you can add a view frustrum, you can see where they're looking again now. So you can see in pane C, you can see a kind of a pink and blue triangles coming out of these faces. And these show the view frustrums of the two avatars. So now I don't need to look at the other person's face to see where they're looking, because I can look at this view frustrum. And then on D and E, we added also a line representing where the head was looking, and also eye tracking as well. So we want to do a comparison to see if showing this communication cue would change the nature of collaboration compared to a baseline condition where you just see each other. And this is really interesting because in a normal face-to-face communication, of course, you don't have virtual view frustrums coming out of your head. So this shows a video. On the left-hand side is the lab space. The right-hand side is a reconstruction of the lab space. And this is what you see in the AR view, a pink head looking at you with these lines. And then in the VR view, again, another pink head looking at you. And these pink lines show the view frustrum of the person. So now I can see the person is beside me doing some task, and I can see what they're looking at because I can see that pink pyramid. So in this case, the task was to arrange or find virtual cubes and then arrange them together. But it was a collaborative task. One person could only see numbers on the cube and the other person could only see letters. And so you had to find a cube with a certain number letter combination. And you can see in the bottom there, two people collaborating, they weren't able to see each other. They could just have a curtain between the two of them. So when we performed this task, as I said, we was looking at to see how having that view frustrum or the gaze cues would help. And what we found is that actually there was no difference in the task completion time. But when we surveyed people in terms of their co-presence and how easy they found it was to use the technology, people found that the view frustrum cues provided much higher sense of co-presence. So you felt that you were already there. And the head gaze cues made it much easier to perform the task than the baseline condition, although there was no difference between head pointing versus eye tracking pointing. And also when you could see the other person's gaze represented, you had a higher mutual gaze rate, which means you both looked at the same object at the same time. So this gives you an example of what you can do when you combine a space representation. You know, we made a copy of the real space, and we also added these additional cues on top of it. Now, once you've got a copy of the real world, use other things you can do as well in AR/VR collaboration. So one of them might be that you could share a view, so you could jump into somebody else's body, and you could be looking at the real world from somebody else's perspective. And that's what happened when I showed you this shared sphere example where, you know, the person in AR was streaming live video and the person in VR was basically standing in their body. Another interesting thing you can do is with multi-scale collaboration. So once you've got a virtual representation of the real world, you could change the scale of that, and you could make yourself really big or really small, so you can interact with the world in different ways. You might want to do this, for example, if you are looking after a group of people. Maybe you're a fire chief and you've got a group of firemen that go into a building, and you've got some AR technology, so when they're in the building you can track them, and you might be in VR looking at a model of the building and seeing everybody walking around the building, but you might want to make yourself really large so you can see them all in one view. So this video shows that working. On the left-hand side, you can see a person in VR, and he is dropping cubes and cylinders and spheres down. On the right-hand side, you can see the AR view. And now the person in VR has made himself really big. And so you can see now they're looking down at their AR collaborator, and the AR collaborator is looking up at them. And, you know, he's able to drop really large objects in the real world. And the AR collaborator is represented by a very small head. And you can see those view frustrums again we had from before. But then what you can also do is make yourself really small. So if you want to, for example, search in the VR environment and find something, you might want to make yourself really small and search. And so now they're at 1:1 scale. And now he's changed himself down to 1/10 scale. And now you can see him really small in the environment and working at his partner and walking around. So one of the things you can do when you start thinking about spatial teleconferencing is that if you've made a copy of the space, you can do interesting things like changing your body scale or modifying the space in some ways. There are also other ways you can use spatial cues. So in this paper we published in 2020, we looked at what would happen when you how you could use spatial cues over large-scale AR and VR collaboration. So a number of people have been looking at collaboration between somebody in AR and somebody in VR, but in most cases over a quite small space, like a single room. So in this case, we want to look at what happens when you had people collaborating over a large office space, and we're involved in a search task. And so because of that, you have to have somebody guide them to different locations, and it might be really helpful to have more spatial audio and visual cues. So this is the starting space. We had an office environment and over about 90 square meters. And in the top right, there's a red office which is closed off. And this was the where the VR person was standing. And then the person in augmented reality would start outside the door and would basically walk through this large 90 square meter space. So there's the space they walk through. Here's the remote user's VR space. And the task was to try and find small Lego blocks that were scattered through the space. So you can see here's some Lego blocks here. So it's actually quite a difficult task. And the remote person knew where the blocks were and was supposed to guide the person in augmented reality to the blocks. So you had the setup here. You had one person in augmented reality who was wearing a Magic Leap display, and a second person in VR who was guiding them in the environment. And then you had the person in VR was in a scanned copy of the real world. So they had this really large VR environment, and they could teleport through the environment to get to where they wanted to show the people where the objects were. And then the person in AR was able to hear spatial audio cues coming from the object. So you'd hear this sound, and the sound was spatialized where the objects were. And then you could also, you had an AR view, and you could live stream that view to the person inside VR. So in VR, they would see a 3D model of the real world, and also within that model, there'll be a live video feed coming from the AR's user's headset. So this is a video of the system working.
Mixed reality remote collaboration systems have evolved over years, but most research has been focused on visual cues. We introduce a system that shares both visual and spatial auditory cues. We conducted a user study to evaluate the system and found that spatial auditory and visual cues help in efficiently completing collaborative search tasks. Here are a few examples.
Okay, for this object, it's here.
Okay. I feel like I'm getting closer to the object. Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, this object is here.
Okay. Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Yes, looks like it's getting closer.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I can see your hands. There it is.
Yes. Okay, so this object
I can see you
from
moving.
here.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Okay, so in that case, you saw a number of different ways we use spatial audio and visual cues. So in the first case, we just had audio by itself, and it was playing from where the location of the Lego brick was. And then we did two user studies. One was focusing on just the audio, so we compared on spatial versus non-spatial audio. Then the second user study, we had different types of visual cues, including, as you saw in the video, one condition was just audio, another condition was just a virtual hand, and then we had another condition with a head appearing with a view frustrum as well. And what we found was that having that spatial audio significantly increased the social presence, and users really strongly, and also improved the task completion times, and users really strongly preferred having head with a view frustrum and spatial audio cues compared to non-spatial cues. They felt that having non-spatial speech was fine, but they really wanted to have the spatial audio coming from the beacon location. We also found that integrating the visual cues with the spatial audio significantly increased the task performance. So you can see that on the left there, the chart shows the performance time, and H4 is the case where you have a ball representing the person's head with a view frustrum and with the hand as well, and spatial audio. So that was taking about 70 seconds or so to perform the task, and H1 was just with the audio by itself. That was about 120 seconds or so. And as I just said, we know integrating the remote expert's head view frustrum into the spatial audio cues provided a lot better social presence and spatial awareness and system usability. And on the right-hand side, the graph shows the social presence scores. And again, the H4 is significantly higher than the other conditions measured on the social presence scale. So that was an example of sharing simple gestures and a simple representation of a remote person, just a ball with spatial audio. But there's a much richer communication cues you can share. So we've done some other work looking at different types of hand gestures. So for example, you've got a remote expert who's got a head-mount display on, and as I showed with the shared sphere, you can track their hands, and then you've got a person wearing the augmented reality display who can see this virtual hand appearing in space. So one of the questions is, what type of gesture cue should be shared and how should you represent that hand? And we're particularly interested in looking at using the hand by itself or using the hand as a pointer. So in 1D, when you made a point finger with your hand, when you pointed the index finger, you'd see a virtual beam shooting out of the hand into the real world. And then in 1C, we added the ability to do sketching. So you can now move your hand and draw in the real world and leave an annotation. And then 1E, it combined pointing and sketching. So the question was, what type of these gesture cues would be most helpful with an AR/VR collaboration? So we performed a number of different tasks. You can see on the right-hand side, we did a test where we had 3 tasks. One was Lego block assembly. The second was a tangram task, and the third was some origami. And what you'll notice from these three is that the 3A, the block assembly, is really a 3D task. You're building a 3D shape, whereas 3B and 3C are really 2D tasks in that you're arranging shapes on a surface. And so we then tested with 4 different hand cues. So with number 1 was just hands by themselves. Number 2 was using hands as a pointer. And number 3 was hands and sketching. And then number 4 was combining the hands with a pointer and with sketching as well. So when we did this user study, what we found was that using the sketching cues enabled users to complete the task significantly faster, especially in the tasks that had the 3D Lego task, because that was a really complicated 3D task. You had to be able to sketch out how to arrange objects relative to each other. And then that didn't change the amount of co-presence, but the users overwhelmingly preferred combining a hand with a pointer and sketching. And that was because it gave them the maximum flexibility. You know, if they needed to point, they could point. If they wanted to do sketching, they could sketch. And there's a couple of quotes there from people who use the system. So one person said that sketching allowed for drawing for accuracy, and whereas the hand was for just general use for pointing at objects. And somebody else said sketch is pretty useful for describing actions that was difficult by verbal verbs and could express more details. So especially again with the Lego, where you had to explain how to rotate a brick around or manipulate a brick relative to another brick, having that sketching ability is really, really helpful. Another important communication cue you can share is with eye gaze. And so most recently, we've been looking at how we can share eye gaze behavior between an AR and VR user. So of course, many of you may have been using eye gaze already in AR or VR systems, and it's becoming more common now with commercial systems. So the Microsoft HoloLens 2 has eye tracking in it. The HTC Vive Pro Eye has eye tracking, and the Magic Leap. And so a wide range of commercial displays are now getting eye tracking in them. But most of them use a very simple representation of the eye gaze information. So in many cases, there might just be a virtual line coming out from your head and following the eye gaze. So we wanted to look at how we could change the gaze representation depending on people's eye gaze behavior. So, you know, in the real world, when you've got looking around with your eyes, you can have different types of behavior. You could have a searching behavior where we're scanning very fast. You could have a fixation behavior where we're looking at an object. You could be reading instead of a reading behavior, or you can even try and make an eye gaze gesture where you want to, for example, look in a circle. So we want to look at how you could show those different behaviors and then represent them using AR and VR cues, and then give the other person an idea of what you're doing with your eyes. So we set up the system here, which has a AR-VR collaboration. You can see on the left-hand side the person with the HoloLens, and in the real world, they were surrounded by these many icons. You can see the black and white icons. And then we had a 360 camera on a tripod in the middle of the space, and that was live streaming to a remote person who is now on the VR side. And when the person in AR looked at the tripod, they would see a virtual head appearing on the tripod with an eye gaze cue appearing from that. And then similarly, the person in VR would see a virtual head on top of the real body of the person in AR with an eye gaze cue coming out from it. So that's the overall system design. We had 3 different types of gaze cues. So you can see on the right-hand side, when somebody focused for a period of time on a spot, we would change their gaze rays to be yellow. And then when both people were looking at the same point, we would change the gaze ray to be green. And when the person was fixating around, then we would take the last 10 positions where the eyes were and make that into a kind of a heat map, so left dots behind. And then finally, if you were browsing around and you were dwelling less than half a second in any one location, then your gaze range would say, gaze ray would stay blue. So you could tell from the gaze ray what the other person was doing, and you could, you know, when you both looked at the same object, both your rays would change. So here's a little animation showing that working. So you can see the person on the left-hand side is browsing around, and so they've got a blue gaze range. The people on the bottom left are both looking at the same point, so they have now a green ray. Then the person is focusing, they've got a yellow ray, and then the person is looking around and fixating, and there's this kind of trail of dots left behind showing what they've been looking at. So this little video shows the system working.
Our system, I'm Iris, is a 360 panoramic mixed reality remote collaboration system that shows gaze behavioral cues as bidirectional spatial virtual visualizations shared between remote collaborators. In our system, the local host shares and receives verbal and gaze communication cues using an AR headset while streaming a live 360 panoramic video of his or her surroundings to and from a remote collaborator. We use a combination of a virtual gaze ray and a cursor, which is placed where the ray and a physical surface intersect to clearly indicate the target of interest. We also add a virtual avatar from where the ray starts. The overall effect is that the VR user feels that they are standing in the same real environment as a local AR user, while being able to have an independent point of view. To synchronize and amplify gaze behavioral cues between collaborators, we have designed 4 different visualization styles. First, browsing state. It is defined as short eye movements, such as the cut, blink, or shift that are under 500 milliseconds. Second, focus state. We define the threshold of dwell time at 500 milliseconds. So any collaborator dwell equals or more than the set time will turn gaze visualizations into yellow color. Third, mutual state. We change both collaborator visualizations into green to indicate gaze overlap or joint gaze awareness. Fourth, fixated circle map. We also use transparent color circle, which is 8% opacity, to map the latest 10 focus locations for each collaborator. In the meantime,
okay, so I'll stop the video there. So we're just in the process now of doing some user studies with this, and the initial results seem to show that being able to share that gaze rays significantly enhances a sense of presence and also improves performance, because we know where the other person is looking now as well. But it's going to take a little bit more time to do the final data analysis. So the last thing I want to talk about is how you can also use an avatar to separate out communication cues from the body. So you can see on the left-hand side, 2 people inside VR collaborating. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the lady has turned away and she's looking at the shelf now. And the man is behind her pointing an object at the shelf, but she can't really see him anymore. So she doesn't really get that communication cue anymore. So we had the idea that if you're in the situation where you lose sight of your collaborator, then you could create a miniature avatar of them and make it appear in your real world as well. So you can see on the right-hand side, left-hand side, sorry, you can see a life-size AR avatar, but then you can see a miniature avatar appearing as well. And this is particularly important where you've got an augmented reality display. Many augmented reality displays have a limited field of view, and so it's quite hard actually to see a life-size avatar in the real world, and at the same time looking at the AR workspace, because the field of view is too small. So this little video shows that. So here's the AR workspace and looking around, and you can see some AR content on the table. And then you've got this large avatar beside you, but you can't look at the content, the workspace at the same time. So what we do is we create this little miniature avatar, this mini me, and we use that avatar to show the same communication behaviors. So for example, the person's now looking at this block, and the miniature avatar appears and reproduces the gaze and gesture of the large person avatar behind them. So we can use this to communicate the same communication cues. So what we've done in this case is we have separated out the communication cues and represent them separately, so they're always in your field of view, regardless of whether you can see the life-size avatar or not. So as you look away from the life-size avatar, the mini-me appears and it stays pointed to the same location in the real world. And so we've done some user studies like this, and what we found, we had 2 tasks: an asymmetric task where one person was an expert, the other person was a novice, and a symmetric task where they both had the same information. And we found that using this mini-me significantly improved performance time in the asymmetric task by 20%. It also improved social presence, and people, either 60% or 63% or 75% of the users preferred having that mini-me over a condition without it limiting me. And one person, for example, said, I felt like that I was talking to my partner. So being able to see your remote collaborator in view at all times significantly increased your ability to communicate with them and to collaborate. So let me just talk a little bit about future trends. A couple of things. One thing that's really important, I think really interesting, is that just yesterday, Niantic released, Niantic, who produced Pokemon Go, released their Lightship SDK. And Lightship is a developer tool that allows you to scan the real world and make a real copy of the real world. And so I'll show a small video of this working now.
Merging reality with the virtual world has been a sci-fi vision for a long time. Niantic Lightship allowed us to start working towards that vision. When we were invited to the week-long Lightship Global Jam, we knew that with their new SDK, we wanted to blur the line between digital and physical reality. As the first step, we created an augmented reality experience for the wonderful Zrinjevac Park in Zagreb. By using the Lightship meshing system, we were free to build an experience in which you can interact fully with your environment. Experience where digital objects completely respond to the real world. In the second step, we created a digital inversion of the park for desktop and virtual reality. Everything realistic in the virtual world is digital in the real world, and vice versa. Think of it like an upside-down digital twin. Next, we connected the two. Anything that affects the real world also affects the virtual world, and anything that happens in the virtual world affects the real one. Finally, and most importantly, we added people to the experience. By using the Lightship multiplayer system, you can now have a shared augmented reality experience in the same location. But it can do even more than that. Someone in the real world using augmented reality can interact with someone in the virtual world as if they were in the same place. At the end of the Lightship Global Jam
so I'll stop the video there, but you can see this is really impressive technology. And what this means now is that using your mobile phone, you can do a real-time scan of your surroundings and then share that with people in VR. And now you can really create that kind of spatial teleconferencing experience where you can have an AR person in the real world collaborating with a VR person, and you can update the model of the real world in real time. And so this becomes a super exciting opportunity for us to create new types of spatial teleconferencing experiences. So what I've talked a lot about today is about experience capture and about being able to move from sharing spaces to sharing places. But this is just one of the important trends that are happening in communication technology. Another important trend is towards more natural collaboration through having faster networks. So when I first started in computing, we had dial-up modems that were very slow, and now I've got a gigabit connection to my apartment. So that means I can stream huge amounts of data through the network and have very realistic characters. And then another important trend is this trend towards implicit understanding. So I've already shown a couple of examples of technology where you can recognize people's face expressions or their gaze and gesture. And we've got other devices that can also recognize our behaviors and our emotions. So these three areas towards natural collaboration, experience capture, and implicit understanding are very important trends happening in the communication space. And they overlap at this area of empathic computing. And that's where my lab is researching. So the main goal of empathic computing is answering this question: can we develop systems that allow us to share what we're seeing, hearing, and feeling with others? So go beyond standard desktop teleconferencing and creating a much more immersive experience where you can really understand what the other person is feeling around you. And of course, there's lots of technology that helps with that. So we've got some trends that are happening now in the AR, VR space with better displays, real-time space capture, like I just showed you with Niantic Labs, gesture and eye tracking, and also integrating now a variety of sensors into head-mount displays. So you can now have heart rate sensors or EEG in the head-mount displays, and through that you can better sense emotion. And all of these three things will combine together into what you might call empathic teleexistence. And the goal of empathic teleexistence is really to move somebody from being an observer in a collaborative experience to being a participant and feel like they're working together, and changing the nature of communication from explicit to implicit communication, and really create collaboration experiences where people do things together. And people are already starting to work in this space. There's been, for the last 10 or 15 years, people are looking at how you can have tele-existence robots where you can put a VR headset on and you can feel like you're inside a robot body. And it means you can now remotely experience a real environment. This sounds a little bit like what science fiction. In fact, there's a really bad movie that was made 10 years ago called Surrogates that was just that. So I'll show a little clip of this. In this movie, the idea is that in the future, we all have really inexpensive robots and we can go and do very dangerous activities with our robots and we never get hurt because we're experiencing the world through a robot. And so you interact with the robot through a VR display. So here's Bruce Willis going into his robot in VR, and then here's this robot walking out in the real world and interacting in the real world. And in this movie, of course, you can never be hurt because you're a robot, but for the first time, people start getting killed, or the robots start getting killed, and the real people start dying as well. So it's kind of a mystery to why that's happening. That may sound like science fiction, but actually, it's become a real product. And here's a company in Japan called Teleexistence that does this for real. So you can see this person now going to VR, and he's selecting a robot, and the robot is in a surf shop in Hawaii. And so the robot has stereo cameras and stereo microphones, so it can hear and perceive the real world. It also has arms, and so it can touch things, and he has tactile sensors, so he can feel what the robot's touching. So now he's doing some remote shopping with the robot. So that's one potential future for this spatial teleconferencing and experiential existence. So today what I talked about is about how we have current conferencing has limitations, and AR and VR can enable spatial teleconferencing to overcome some of these limitations by providing really strong spatial cues, and most importantly by capturing and sharing your surroundings. And there are many directions for future research, and particularly with empathic computing. But if you think about spatial user interfaces, there are many areas in that where we could benefit from their research. So, for example, doing research on how you can capture space, how you can understand space when you've got a point cloud of the space, how you can do semantic segmentation, how you can scale up to support going through large spaces or through large virtual clouds, representation of avatars, doing more exploration around the communication cues, and also capturing and sharing other activities, cues as well, like physiological cues like the brain activity. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about today. Of course, this work wasn't done by me. It was done by my students. So here's a snapshot of the students and staff that have been in my lab over the last few years. So I'm happy to answer questions. Here's my email address and our website where you can see more of our research, and my Twitter feed as well. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, I'm more than happy to send you the copy of the slides as well. So let me stop the screen sharing, and it looks like we've got a few minutes left for questions, hopefully.
Great. So we thank you so much, Mark, for a presentation, a great presentation. We have time for questions. Attendees can post in the chat. If you want to, you can raise your hand and I'll let you talk. I just want to make sure, hopefully someone is asking questions. We've been testing the chat just to make sure it was working. I think it's working. So we'll get questions. I'll start with one question myself. I think it's a great presentation, and I think it depends on the application. There's different factors to consider, but one factor that it always keeps coming back to me is that when you want to have this type of collaborative environments, right? Not just latency can be an issue in some cases, not in all cases, right? I mean, we know people do gaming and all this type of stuff already, but what exactly do you think about latency and trying to reduce latency for the type of interactive systems in a collaborative environment? What kind of work you have done or you're looking into, or what are the challenges that you see? That would be my question, and then there's already some other questions coming up.
Sure. So latency is a very important problem, especially if you want to capture your real surroundings and stream it. That's huge amounts of data. Luckily, though, some of that's being solved through the use of 5G and also through edge computing, where you do a lot of the computing away from the final device. We've also been looking at, and other people have been researching what you can do in terms of reducing the amount of data you need to send by only sending key features. So instead of having a photorealistic avatar that's sent using video of somebody, if you can send a representation of the face and use some machine learning at the other end to reconstruct that, you can create something that's almost photorealistic with only 5% or so of the data you have to send. So the main solution to latency, I guess, is to reduce the amount of bandwidth. I could imagine in the future, though, when you've got a situation with extreme latency, maybe trying to communicate between the Earth and the moon, you may have artificial intelligent characters that you've trained on your own behaviors and language and voice that exist as your surrogates, and somebody on the moon, where there's many minutes of latency, they will interact with these characters, and by and large, the characters will be able to interact if you were at that location with very low latency, and then because they've basically got your brain inside the character. So I think there's a few solutions, but it's still a problem that needs to be researched. It's one of the very important areas to be researched.
Great, and there's some questions. I think there are some questions being sent to the via Discord. So I'm going to start with this one. Great talk. How could you envision giving a keynote or paper presentation talks within these paradigms, or having the presenter and audience potentially wearing AR, VR headset? So that's one of the questions.
Well, actually, people already do that. So I attended a conference about 6 months ago using the Outspace VR, and I gave a presentation in Outspace VR using my slides, and there were maybe 100 people watching the presentation, all in VR headsets. But of course, everybody's represented by avatars, so I couldn't see them wearing the headsets. I could just see a crowd of people in front of me in space. So already you can use social VR environments for doing presentations in VR in a very natural way. It worked out pretty well. So there's no problem at all.
Yeah. I actually would like that robot to teach my class. That would be nice.
Yes, that would be great, wouldn't it? So you could be on the beach somewhere and you could remote teach your class. Yeah, definitely.
So another question here, and I apologize, I don't know who's asking those questions, but I'm just getting them right now. Is haptic feedback a limitation of the medium AR? Are there simple strategies for haptics, or will you use a specialized hardware?
Oh, well, so I would say that haptics is a big limitation. If you look at the development of the technology, in my opinion, with the graphics, we're almost able to create photorealistic graphics now in real time. And so it's become in huge leaps and bounds. I remember 20 years ago when I was at SIGGRAPH, and they showed the first time anybody had rendered 1 million polygons per second on a chip, and that was a huge achievement. And now, of course, we're rendering billions of polygons, and it's really great. But the haptics really is still at that stage 20 years ago we were with the graphics. So with haptics, it's still very crude, and you have to wear mechanical devices on your hand or some vibrators or things like that. So I think that's one of the areas where huge advances can be made, but we're still at the very early stages. And I guess at the conference here, the next day or two, you'll see some interesting papers about haptics as well. And it's a very important area, especially with interaction with social interaction, because you oftentimes want to shake somebody's hand or pick up an object or play sport where you have to interact with somebody and touch them, and if without that sense of touch, it becomes very difficult to do that.
Thank you, Mark. Another question we have is from Asaf Ohana. Very interesting session, Mark. What software do you use in creating these solutions?
Oh, almost everything I showed you was done using the Unity game engine. And of course, the different hardware has its own developed kits. Although the empathy glasses, that was not done using Unity because that was just a 2D video conferencing experience. So we used some simple, I think it was Python code to do the gaze tracking and the rendering of the graphics. But most everything else is done using Unity and a variety of AR and VR headsets.
Thank you. There's a lot of questions. There's the following question from actually one of ours, B. Brooke, and I quote, he says, a slightly more insidious question. Do you have insight into the general social perception of AR use in public? Do you think it is something that society would enjoy using in public and seeing use in public?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's one of the, actually, if I had more time, I could give a whole another talk about the acceptance of AR and VR. And one of the big problems with acceptance is around the social issues. So a few years ago in the US, there was a survey done. They showed a picture of somebody wearing an AR smart glasses, and they were pretty nice form factor. They looked a little bit bigger than regular sunglasses, but not too ugly. And they asked 4,500 people if they would want to wear this type of display. And less than 30% of the people said they would be happy wearing that. And then they also asked people who were already using AR on their mobile phones or tablets, and so playing Pokemon Go, or maybe using some sort of map navigation or some application. And they found that 20% of those people had some social problems. So, for example, if you hold your tablet up and you're looking through the tablet to see augmented reality map in the real world, then somebody across the street might think that you're filming them, and they might get angry at you because they think you're filming them, where actually you're trying to use the app. So both of those things show us that we've got a long way to go before we have widespread social acceptance. But I think that within 10 or 15 years' time, people will look at AR displays in much the same way they looked at Bluetooth headsets 15 years ago, where, I remember when I was first in an airport, and I saw this man who was yelling at himself in the corner of the airport, and I couldn't understand what was happening. And then when I walked closer, I could see he had a headset in his ear, and that was the first time I'd seen a Bluetooth headset. And so I realized what he was doing. So he wasn't crazy. He was talking on the phone to somebody. So I could imagine the same thing will happen as AR glasses become more commonplace. People will understand what they are and become more accepting of them. For example, now you can buy, or very shortly you'll be able to buy the Snap spectacles for the latest version, and these really do look just like a pair of sunglasses, but they have a camera and they have an AR display inside them, and so they're becoming, the form factor is becoming more socially acceptable. So I think that some of those social problems will be addressed in the next 10 years or so. A very important area to be researching.
So I think we'll probably have two questions, and we'll be done.
Sure.
This question, and I'm trying to read, I think it's by Garvar. Again, my pronunciation is horrible. I did have a speech pathology when I was a kid, but I don't want to use it as an excuse, but Raj Kumar Darbar, is your bidirectional eye gaze cues project, in your bidirectional eye gaze cues project, do you notice the VR avatar is appearing in random places in the AR user environment due to the similar room size?
That's a great question. So we've done a couple of bidirectional examples. So the one example where we had the different gaze cues, we had a 360 camera that was on a tripod, and the AR person, when they looked at the tripod, they would see a virtual head on top of the tripod, and the head didn't move position, it just rotated around. And the VR person who was in the room, they also didn't walk much. They mostly stood in one place and rotated around. So in that case, there wasn't any jumping around. In the other case, where we had the large room where we were collaborating with an AR VR person, then the VR user would teleport to different locations. So certainly the VR person would disappear and reappear when they teleported, but they could also walk to a small amount of distance because they were in a small physical room. But that didn't seem to it didn't seem to produce any bad influence or effect on the collaboration. It may have been because the person in AR had a quite small field of view with their AR display, and so the VR person was appearing and disappearing from this field of view anyway because they were looking around and only being able to see small parts of objects. So I think in both cases there are ways you can make it so they don't just jump around. If we wanted to, for example, with teleportation, we could have had a smooth in and out teleportation where they would see the AR person smoothly move to the final location rather than jumping to the final location. So it's technically possible to make it appear very natural.
Thank you. And the last question, this is my question, Mark.
Sure.
And I tend to think that 10, 15, 20 years the AR optics are going to be great, the glasses are going to be really nice. But listening to Carl Gutek, which writes about AR, which I think you know as well in
yes.
one of the podcasts, he said that people like me that think like this have drank the Kool-Aid, that optics are not going to get good. And I actually read his columns a lot, but so I know it's hard to predict, but one of the biggest issues we have in AR is the optics that I know very little about. So what is your thought on how AR glasses are going to improve over time?
Well, I think so the optics, especially with optical see-through display, like a whole lens too, that's the most challenging type of AR glass, because you want to have a very wide field of view glass, but in a very small form factor. And also because you have got a see-through glass, of course, it's very hard to block the real world with the augmented reality image. And then in those cases, you also have a fixed focal length, which oftentimes doesn't match what you're looking in the real focal length. So if you have an AR object on your real hand, when you move your hand close to your face, it's really hard to keep the AR object in view while the hand is in focus at the same time. So that's the most challenging. I think there's research being done to address all of those areas. So there's very nice work that was presented at the EISMA conference a month or so ago, showing how you could build occlusive see-through displays that would block out the real world in certain pixels and make it look very realistic. But that system was only working on a bench mount large optic, so it was a long way from being in the head. But in the near term, I think what you'll see though is video see-through head mount displays, and those ones have a lot less problems. For example, if you have the chance, you should try the Vario XR3, which is a wide field of view head mount display, which has two cameras in it and uses pass-through video to provide an AR experience. And in this case, it's wide field of view. The video is very high resolution. The pixels of the graphics, of course, block the video of the real world, so the occlusion problem is solved. And so it's a quite big form factor, so it's not in a pair of consumer-ready glasses, but I think that's the type of near-term solution you might get. So it may be 15 or 20 years before all of the problems with optical see-through are solved and they're packaged into a form factor that everybody can use. But in the nearer term from that, I think you'll start seeing more video see-through displays like the Vario display. There's another company called Lynx doing the Lynx R1, which is the same type of thing, but much cheaper. And that, and of course, with the mobile phones and tablets, you're also having a video see-through AR experience, and that's very successful. If you've got a mobile phone in your pocket, you can have an AR experience. So there's billions of people that have that one. So that's probably the near-term entry, and then further away is the high end. I know with Carl Gutek, he's a super smart guy and is very knowledgeable about what's happening with the AR glasses, and he's particularly impressed with companies now that are starting to work in the retinal scanning. There's a company called iWay, which is in Silicon Valley, that he wrote a very nice review about a couple of weeks ago. And there's some new technology like contact lens technology, which also could provide some very interesting options for AR displays. So I think I could easily imagine that a lot of these problems will be solved in 15 or 20 years' time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the presentation. Okay. It's been a great presentation. We thank you again. I don't know if you were able to join the Discord channel, but I'm sure people will have questions at a later time.
Yes, I'll be on Discord, so I'll be happy to answer those. And if you want to email me any questions, you can email me as well, so it's no problem.
Great. And we will, you're welcome to post your slides on Discord if you like, and we will be we'll be releasing this video probably a week from now for anybody to watch and as well. So thank you so much.
Great.
And yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Great. And we are going to the break. So in 10 minutes, 9 minutes, the new session is going to start. So we're going to go to the break and we'll let the session the session chair and the paper presenters come in as panelists now as well. Anybody else can stay. So thank you so much. And in total, we have just an updated number. I think we have over 275 attendees. They're not all connected at the same time, but for SUI, it's a good number. Right now, we had before when Mark was talking around 65, which usually SUI has been between 70 to 100 participants. So it's been a good number for being remote anyways. Thank you so much. We'll go in a break now.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Faisa, you may want to let the panelists in the session share in for the next one.
I had one question,
Yes.
Francisco. I'm on the Discord now, but I don't see, there's no channel for the keynote, right? So we're all people, well, they just message me directly, will they? I see the papers all have their own channels. For example.
We'll go ahead and ask Brooke to create the channels. I thought they were created. So Brooke, if you're there, or Cheyenne, you can tell Brooke, please create 2 keynote channels, one for Mark and one for Wolfgang, so they can post their information. So we'll get it worked out in 10 minutes.
No problem. That's great. Thanks so much. Great.
Thank you. So Faisa, let's let the people in then, since we're in a break. You can share your PowerPoint presentation now, so we can share
I think we should leave this webinar and then join with the next one.
Oh, so you didn't do this one, John, because there's a new one. Okay, yeah. So yes. Everyone, my apologies. Just go to the Discord. There's a new link, and you can remind everybody, Faisa, via Discord the new link. So we have different links for the different sessions to make recording a little easier. So we're going to exit this one and we're going to come to the other one. So thank you, everybody.
So also, if they registered in Steven, they probably received an email.
Yeah, but we just want
to
remind people, I forget all the time. Sometimes I get triple booked. Tell me about it. So yeah, so Brooke and Cheyenne can remind them via Discord. So I'm going to exit here. Let's go to the other one. Thank you, everybody.